I'm very excited with this next person because she just exudes energy. When I first met her, it was like, whoa, can you tone that down? She said no. Talking about Pauline Haynes. She's a life coach. She also enjoys performing sacred wedding ceremonies. She has been a massage therapist, a radio talk show host, a personal chef, a leader of workshops, a cultural awareness trainer, and an art curator. You can call it like, a Renaissance man. She's a Renaissance woman. Yeah. Pauline's intuitive nature and her out-of-the-damn-box way of thinking gives her the edge. Clients who are attracted to her are ready to intentionally move from self-limiting beliefs, behaviors, and decisions to create the shift necessary for their magnificent unfoldment. So it is a great pleasure that first of all, her soul talk is called Unmasked. Please welcome SAC Soul Talks, Pauline Haynes.
Thank you. It is such an honor to be here today, and one of the things that I've noticed is that everybody has said something about what I've been thinking, what I believe, and what's in my sphere of saying. But I'd like to give honor to the speaker before me by quoting something from his book. And it says, "Today I feel connected to my innermost world. I don't know why, I just feel it. I feel like I may live in some form forever. My friend said this is spirit, working whether I like it or not." And spirit is working with each and every one of us. And as spirit works, who knows what will come from this talk. But before I begin, I want to give gratitude to the ancestors, because without the ancestors, I would not be here today. So gratitude to my ancestors who have guided me all this way. So to them, I say, Ashe. My gratitude also to RJ and JG for their foresight and their insight on the ongoing success of this event. And to the friends whose physical space we occupy, I trust that my talk will somehow embody their vision and mission of finding alternatives to violence, ensure equality in our neighborhoods and around the world, seeking to understand and take concrete action to bring about change. I read the sign somewhere, and it says, "Awareness is like the sun. When it shines on things, they are transformed." So for all the vegetarians in the audience, I'm going to add a little meat today. But rest assured, you won't have to ingest. I invite you to listen with a quiet heart and a clear ear. And while you're listening, I ask that you bear these 4 questions in mind. What is it I'm not seeing? How could I see this differently? How can I grow from this? What is the opportunity for me? I share a poem by Laurence Dunbar. It was written in the 1800s, but is still pertinent today as it was then. "We wear the mask that grins and lies. It hides our cheeks and shades our eyes. This debt we pay to human guile. With torn and bleeding hearts we smile, and mouth with myriad subtleties. Why should the world be overwise in counting all our tears and sighs? Nay, let them only see us while we wear the mask. We smile, but O great Christ, our cries to thee from tortured souls arise. We sing, but oh, the clay is vile beneath our feet and long the mile. But let the world dream otherwise. We wear the mask." There is a condition called blindness. And by that I mean when you don't know something. You're blinded to facts and you're blinded to information. This is very different than ignorance. Ignorance is when you don't know, but you're willing to gather the information and you make a commitment to do whatever it takes to do what you think is necessary. So today I ask you to suspend all your judgments, remove the mask as your focus, just for today, to just be about what's possible. So let's think committed humility, or rather, an insight into what it is to be human. The purpose of Soul Talk is to connect, inspire, and explore. So come with me on a journey of exploration. We may have held the belief that being spiritual or enlightened means that our S-O-U-L or S-O-L-E purpose is to meditate, to be forgiven, to be always happy. That's all great. But if you're wanting to reap the benefits of a garden, you first have to get just a little dirty. You have to prepare the soil, pull out the weeds, till the ground, and so on. Like nature, we are ever changing. We're metamorphosing. So for these few moments, I ask that you be like water, be fluid, be present, flow. You might even choose to close your eyes and simply listen. Sometimes inconvenient truths can take us away from the luxury of peace in our surroundings and in our psyches. So being aware, it could be the antidote that our hearts are needed to open wide so our spirits can soar. So let us be prepared to get dirty before we grow. And by the end of this talk, you will get why I titled it Unmasked. I trust that somewhere in my meanderings, it will come back to the awakening of our soul, or rather, the agenda of our soul. So why do we wear masks? I'm not talking about like a mask ball or Halloween. We all know about that. I'm talking about the mask that hides us from the pain, the sorrows, the insecurities, shame, injustices, cultural differences, racism, everything that's simply about us being human. Each and every one of us in this room, I dare say, has been lonely, been humiliated, has loved, maybe even hated. We may have been physically or emotionally hurt. And so just to survive, we wear a mask. So how has your mask protected you, kept you safe, kept you anonymous, kept you smiling when all you wanted to do was to cry rivers of tears? You know when you're not feeling your best and someone says to you, "How are you?" And without a thought you said, "I'm fine." You know darn well you're not fine. You're concerned about the mortgage, your health, the kids. Put anything you want about what it is that you're concerned about. But when somebody says, "How are you?" you say, "You're fine." So there is an acronym for FINE. But because this is a group of genteel folks, I will modify the language. And being a woman of a certain age, I can, and do often have a salty side to my language. But that side of me will be masked today. See how important mask can be? So the acronym for FINE is effed up, insecure, neurotic, emotional. So whenever someone asks you, "How are you?" just remember F-I-N-E and tell the truth. Just take the mask off. And so we cannot escape some of the ongoing happenings in the White House and how we'll all be impacted. But we must remember, it's not what goes on in the White House that's important, although of course that is. What we have to pay attention to and be mindful of is what goes on in my house, in your house. What will be the legacy of this reality? The reality of our houses. What are we turning our backs on? What are we turning our focus to? What are we ignoring? What are we being indifferent about? The challenges facing us in 2017 are very similar to the challenges that were faced in 1619 when the first slaves were brought to this country, which incidentally is 1 year before the Mayflower. If we think of Sojourner Truth, Nat Turner, Frederick Douglass, Harriet Tubman, Martin Luther King, Malcolm X, Emmett Till, Medgar Evers, King, Till, and Evers were murdered, but they did some work. These are folks who have gone before us and had the courage and dared to remove their mask, the mask of indifference. They spoke their truth despite the odds that were coming from their soul. The challenges we're facing in the United States today are the challenges that have been faced and are still prevalent in other countries. It's prevalent in Syria, in Afghanistan, in Mali, in Turkey, in the Democratic Republic of Congo, in Chad, and so many other places. These challenges are likely on very different levels. But one thing is for sure, they all speak to our inhumanity. Indifference can be very tempting. In fact, it can be downright seductive. So if your soul's been asleep, it's time for you to wake it up. The noted Holocaust survivor, Elie Wiesel, said in 1999 when he was giving a speech at the White House, he said, and I quote, 54 years ago to the day, a young Jewish boy from a small town in the Carpathian Mountain woke up not far from Goethe's beloved Weimar in a place of eternal infamy called Buchenwald. He was finally free, but there was no joy in his heart. He thought there never would be again. Liberated a day earlier by American soldiers, he remembers their rage at what they saw. And even if he lives to be a very old man, he will always be grateful to them for that rage and also for their compassion. Though he did not understand their language, their eyes told him what he needed to know, that they too would remember and bear witness. We're on the threshold of a new century, a new millennium. What will the legacy of this vanishing century be? How will it be remembered in the new millennium? Surely it will be judged, and judged severely in both moral and metaphysical terms. These failures have cast a dark shadow over humanity. World wars, senseless chains of assassinations, Gandhi, the Kennedys, Martin Luther King, Sadat, Rabin, bloodbaths in Cambodia and Nigeria, so many places. The inhumanity in the Gulag and the tragedy of Hiroshima, end quote. Our indifference is still prevalent. And I'd like to add the following names to the list of murders and atrocities in current times in this country. Sandra Bland, Trayvon Martin, Michael Brown, Eric Garner, Dontre Hamilton, John Crawford, Ezell Ford, Dante Parker, Tanisha Anderson, Tamir Rice, Tony Robinson, Freddie Gray, Philando Castile. None of these people were famous. They were ordinary folks doing extraordinary things in their everyday lives with their families. Their death at the hands of peace officers brought their names to our attention. They died, not because of crimes they had committed. Their only crime was the color of their skin. Do you think their souls were closed or their souls were open? That's something to think about. Dr. Martin Luther King, in his oft-quoted I Have a Dream speech, said, and I quote, "There are those who are asking the devotees of civil rights, when will you be satisfied? We can never be satisfied as long as the Negro is a victim of the unspeakable horrors of police brutality." Remember the names I just quoted. "We can never be satisfied as long as our bodies, heavy with the fatigue and travel, cannot gain lodging in the motels and the highways. We cannot be satisfied as long as a Negro in Mississippi cannot vote. Think of the 2016 election. And a Negro in New York believes he has nothing for which to vote. No, we're not satisfied, and we will not be satisfied until justice rolls down like the waters and righteousness like a mighty stream, end quote. 54 years ago, that speech was written. Do you see any parallels between that and today? So sometimes when we're in our ethereal space, and we're thinking that we're so spiritual, we forget the history. So every day in my meditation of gratitude, I have to ask for special protection for the rainbows. Rainbows for my grandsons, my brothers, my nephews, my cousins, and all the black men, young and old, who walk the streets in these United States. Talking about this may make you uncomfortable. I make no apologies for sharing these thoughts. Injustice ought to make us uncomfortable. And so, ladies and gentlemen, we come together at Soul Talk to connect with each other, to begin the healing. But first, we must have conversations. We have to go beyond listening to deep, compassionate listening, to not just listen, but to hear, to have open and honest conversation, to have unconditional regard for humanity. Humanity is anchored in hope. We heal much better when we're in community because we take care of each other. We see each other. We touch each other. And if we can be unmasked for long enough, we may even touch each other's souls. So when we go back to our own houses, there will be a very clear space where our humanity can be freely unveiled. We are all interconnected. So what impacts you and you and you also impacts me. Sankofa is a word in the Twi language which means to go back and get it. The Sankofa symbolizes the Akan people's quest for knowledge. It means critical examination and questioning. It is represented by a mythical bird with its feet firmly planted forward, with its head turned backwards. I encourage each and every one of you to look at the history of this country, not the whitewashed or left out history, but the real history of our ancestors. In the book Left to Tell, Discovering God Amidst the Rwandan Holocaust by Immaculée Ilibigazia, and I read from the introduction of her book. She said, "The killers moved from the house and we all began to breathe again. They were gone, but they would be back many times over the next 3 months. I believed that God had spared my life, but I'd learned during the 91 days I spent trembling in fear with 7 others in a closet-sized bathroom that being spared is much different than being saved. And this lesson forever changed me. It is a lesson that in the midst of mass murder taught me how to love those who hated and hunted me, and how to forgive those who slaughtered my family," end quote. Her entire family, except for one brother who happened to be out of the country at the time, were murdered. And there were more than 1 million people killed in a 100-day period. Immaculée went back to Rwanda. She confronted the people who killed her family and forgave them. Can you imagine standing in front of somebody who spoke in graphic ways about killing your family and forgive them? So when we talk about soul, I get a sense from what she experienced about what it is to forgive. Viktor Frankl said, "When we're no longer able to change a situation, we are challenged to change ourselves." So in closing, may I again thank you for your attentive listening. I trust I said something that touched some emotion in you, whether it be fear, anger, rage, fury, compassion, surprise, contempt, or even love, humiliation, or maybe enlightenment. Whatever the emotions are, own them because they're part of you. My intention was to be intentional and specific about enlightening to begin the transformation. I invite you to remember all the heroes and shearers who've gone before. Whether they're brought to this country in subhuman quarters, spoon fashion, covered in each other's excrement, whether they were escaping the potato famine in Ireland, whether they came from some other country, escaping some war, somebody came here seeking a better life. Somebody came before us. Somebody is also depending on us in some part of the world. So let us remember our humanity, our saving grace, and let us have the courage to remember that the vices and virtues, they begin right in our house. Our children and our grandchildren, they're depending on us. So let us not disappoint them. C.S. Lewis said, "You can't go back and change the beginning, but you can start where you are and change the ending." So I invite you to remove the mask of indifference and remember, we cannot love another until we first love ourselves. When we practice self-love, we enhance our humanity. Our souls will be touched because we have a rainbow. So when it looks like the sun ain't gonna shine no more, there's always a rainbow in the sky. Thank you.